We ask that you make your comments in a peaceable manner and that you respect everyone's right to offer their public comments attending the meeting. Given the size of the crowd this evening and the fact that I know that many of you have also been rightfully participating in demonstrations, that means when someone finishes speaking, please do not make comments.
My name is Ori Strauss. I use he, him pronouns. I live in South Amherst. I have 2 children at Proper and I'm Gimas alum. I'm also Jewish. I'm the grandson of 4 Holocaust survivors. After the war, my mother's family moved to Israel, where my mother grew up. I spent part of my childhood living in Israeli settlements in the West Bank. And both of my siblings and their families currently live in Israel, which was much of my extended family. I've been advocating for an end to Israel's occupation of Palestine for more than 30 years. The front war is a continuation and intensification of what has always been Israel's policy of subduing and subjugating the Palestinian people. The predictable result is not to end militant Palestinian resistance, but to solidify it. This puts not only Palestinians, but also Israelis like my family in danger. The only way out is just to stop the violence, stop the starvation, and then turn to peace talks based on principles of international law and human rights. For this reason, the Council should vote with the first step on that, which is the resolution in support of the ceasefire of Gaza. Recent surveys by Data for Progress and the SPU have shown very strong support for a ceasefire in every U.S. Democrat polled, including Jewish Americans. Similarly, a December poll of Israelis by the Maverick newspaper found overwhelming support for a ceasefire if it included a hostage deal. Here in town, more than 120 Amherst Jews have signed a letter supporting the resolution and calling out the misguided notion that this support is in any way anti-Semitic. The councils should ask themselves, do I want to stand with my community, public opinion across the country at this historic moment, or stand against it? I urge the council to stand with its own Jewish and Palestinian community here at Amherst and support the resolution.
My name is Rabia Ahmed, and I'm a resident of District 2 here in Amherst. I have 2 children who attend Fort River, and it's well overdue for you to call a ceasefire now and end the horrors in Gaza and acknowledge the humanity of brown and Muslim people as equally worthy. It is a scary time to be a Muslim in America. Growing up here post 9/11, I was forced to hide my identity. My family was targeted by law enforcement. My father was called a terrorist. I was told, your people did this, by the senior-most person during my college internship. Our phones were tapped, and the home of my college-age cousins was raided by the FBI when neighbors reported them for suspicious behavior. They were never charged. Their only crime was being brown and Muslim. Since October 7th, Islamophobia has run rampant once again. Over Thanksgiving weekend, 3 college students speaking Arabic and English were shot while out for a walk in Burlington, Vermont. 2 of them were wearing keffiyehs like this one. Hisham Ardwani is now paralyzed from the chest down. That is 200 miles from here. In October, Wadi al-Fayoum, a Palestinian boy, was fatally stabbed 26 times in his apartment by his landlord. He was 6 years old. I also have a 6-year-old son. He was his class's love leader on Friday at Fort River. As a mother, I fear for my kids, this town's love leaders, because once again they will be targeted for being brown and Muslim. We moved to Western Massachusetts for work and chose Amherst as our home for what this community says it represents, is its commitment to social justice and human rights. And now we will see if that's actually true or just some campaign slogans. Today, you have a choice. The choice of supporting a ceasefire resolution as written, which acknowledges the humanity and suffering of the children and people of Gaza, people like me who are brown and Muslim. If you don't pass it, you will hold up the assumption that my life and the lives of my children are just less worthy. I shouldn't have to beg for our humanity.
My name is Henry Murray, a Palestinian American and Amherst resident since '87. Today, I urge you to do the right thing and vote yes. on the proposed ceasefire for Gaza. On October 16, this town council passed a unanimous resolution condemning Hamas for their attack on Israel, yet failed to condemn Israel's bombardment of Gaza. Despite you stating, and I quote, "We support equal measures for justice and freedom for Israelis and Palestinians alike." At the time of the resolution passing, Israel had already killed 2,800 innocent civilians in Palestine. Gaza has been under a brutal blockade for 17 years before October 7th. During that time, Israel had systematically bombed Gaza in 2008-9, 2012, 2014, 18, and 2021. Over the last 5 months alone, Israel has killed over 35,000 Palestinians. 70% of those are women and children, leaving 70,000 who are injured and displacing about 2.1 million Palestinians in Gaza, who have been 80% of them refugees on their own land. Israel had carried out one of the most vicious and indiscriminate military campaigns against civilians, and only because of the support of our government and our tax money. I ask you, if 1,200 lives mattered, don't 35,000? Doesn't my life as a Palestinian and other Palestinian life matter? Please affirm life and vote yes.
Thank you. Bye. Stop.
Great. Hello, my name is Nathana Leaf. I'm a District 1 resident. I've lived in Amherst for the past 12 years. I've worked for Amherst High School, did my student teaching master's internship at Amherst Middle School, and even worked for the town council, which is just to say my investment in the town of Amherst isn't new or unique to this issue. I also am a community organizer for several groups of Jews that are non-Zionist as a core tenet of our spiritual practice, and I represent hundreds of people of the views that I have. Jews in the United States have been subject to a decades-long pro-Israeli propaganda campaign designed to play on our realistic fears of anti-Jewish violence in order to convince us that the state of Israel is the only solution that keeps Jews safe. To the Jews in this room whose fear for Jewish safety has perhaps led you to oppose the ceasefire measure, I ask you to hear me. I agree that anti-Semitism is frightening, and I have the same trauma in my body, and I know that our ancestors have lived through the same pogroms and genocides. But you have turned down the wrong path on this issue. The strong messaging that we have received in our lives that we were taught about Israel is not true. Israel does not make Jews in diaspora safe. It does not make Jews in Israel safe. And the genocide of Palestinians doesn't make you or me or anyone safe. And there is no amount of genocide that would be worth your safety. Around the world, calls for a ceasefire are growing louder and more clear within the halls of the UN, nationwide governments, and individuals of conscience. In the months and decades to come, when we are asked in Amherst what we did, I hope that I can say that at the minimum my town councilors represented my voice, and along with myself, fellow Jews and non-Jews, we had a clear conscience for ceasefire now. My Jewish religion teaches me that every human life is an entire universe of immeasurable value. And as people die in Palestine continuously in horrific and inhumane ways, under conditions that are unequivocally a genocide, I call upon my elected council to represent my voice. Ceasefire now.
Ceasefire now.
Why are we discussing this resolution about this war? Because like Vietnam, it is on our radios and televisions every day, unlike the conflicts in Syria, Sudan, and Congo. And its images are affecting the lives of most, if not all of us. I support this ceasefire resolution. But what can or should we do tomorrow? First, I believe we should activate an Amherst Refugee and Asylum Applicant Commission to welcome all refugees and asylum seekers, including Palestinians and Jews fleeing this conflict or seeking medical care in the United States. Second, tomorrow, President Biden needs to hear at the ballot box from those of us who consider his leadership a failure on this conflict.
My name is Mark Gobrium, and I'm a sophomore at Amherst Regional High School. I live in Belchertown, however, I have been going to the school district since first grade. In 2021, I was in the car with my jiddo, my grandpa, listening to the news, horrified to hear about the violence against Palestinians perpetrated by the state of Israel. His explanation of historical persecution urged critical thinking and condemnation. These sentiments of shock and horror have intensified, leaving me baffled at the justification of such genocide or the ability to witness it without profound anguish. Being part Lebanese, the topic of Palestinian oppression, struggle, and liberation was no stranger to my household. Growing up, I often overheard conversations between my mother and grandparents about it, and again, I remember the feeling of utter shock and horror when I listened about how Palestinian life, land, and culture were under attack. Learning more and more about this genocide is an increasingly strange feeling. Having to explain to people why innocent Palestinian men, women, and children should not be getting bombed, starved, and tortured. It's a very gut-wrenching feeling, knowing that there are people that think the genocide of Palestinians is good, and that the settler colonial state of Israel should not only continue what they've been doing, but also leave Israel without the proper accountability for their utterly deplorable actions. Finally, it is exhausting and disappointing seeing officials not do or say anything about it and go on funding this genocide. Empathy for Palestinian loss runs deep, and I am unable to fathom the heartbreak of seeing their land destroyed. To be silent is to be complicit. We cannot keep sitting and watching this cost of inaction. Please, I implore all of you to vote yes on the ceasefire resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
But I'm here today to speak in support of the ceasefire resolution. I'm Jewish. My grandfather was a Holocaust survivor, the only survivor in his family. And he did, part of his survival was escaping to Palestine. But his survival and our family's intergenerational trauma that has resulted from that event should not be the cause of violence for others. It does not keep us safe. It does not keep us safe to perpetuate the same kind of harms that were done to us, to others. And so I ask that you please vote in support of a resolution. I also want to point out that some other speakers here have said that this ceasefire resolution does not contain the word peace. Maybe they didn't read it, but it says, reaffirm our commitment to the safety of all members of our community and pledge to join with others seeking just and peaceful solutions. So the word peace is in there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shel Rennerson, and I live in Amherst, District 1. I'm here today to urge you to pass the resolution in support of a ceasefire in Gaza. As others have said, more than 30,000 Gazans have been killed since October, and nearly 2 million have been displaced from their homes. Mass destruction is being wrought on the people of Gaza by the Israeli military, and this is heavily funded by the U.S. government. The U.S. has sent billions of dollars to the Israeli government to fund this mass killing of Palestinians. The tax dollars of famous residents alone contribute over $250,000 every year to this funding. I am not okay with funding the deaths of tens of thousands of people, and I am not okay with our town being complicit in the deaths of tens of thousands of people. A ceasefire resolution in our town will be a powerful tool to put pressure on the state and national government to stop funding the Israeli military's siege on Gaza and to work for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. As a town, we have the opportunity to stand for justice and make a call for peace, and that is why I urge you to pass the resolution in support of a ceasefire in Gaza. Thank you.
Thank you.
I speak in favor of the resolution and specifically for the call for releasing Palestinian detainees as part of the resolution. The IDF now holds at least 3,400 West Bank Palestinians under administrative detention. Let me explain. In the U.S., a person detained but then not charged has a right to be released. But West Bank Palestinians living under military occupation have no such right. The Israeli Human Rights Organization B'Tselem explains, in administrative detention, one is held without trial, despite having committed no offense, on the grounds that one plans to break the law in future. The person is detained without legal proceedings by order of the original military commander, based on evidence not revealed to the detainee nor their lawyer. Courts can renew detention for repeated 6-month periods. Some detainees are held for years. Since October 7th, the IDF has detained about 6,500 West Bank Palestinians, and detainees now total 9,000. Prison authorities started treating detainees and prisoners more harshly. Less food, worse food, cold spaces without warm clothing or blankets, denial of medical treatment to the sick or injured. Detainees report that a special force called Katir in Israeli prisons has been forcefully entering prison cells almost daily with weapons and iron rods. Prisoners and detainees have been brutally beaten with iron rods for extended periods, many of whom have sustained fractures in various parts of their bodies as a result. In the name of justice, administrative detention should end, as UN officials urge, and all such detainees should be released.
Thank you for your comment.
There are many reasons I support this Gaza ceasefire resolution and all of its provisions, and I hope each of you votes in favor of it. But I want to focus my brief time on one of them, and that's hostage release, one of the asserted Gaza war aims. Last November, a ceasefire, remember, a ceasefire, and negotiations between Hamas and the Israeli government through the offices of Qatar and the US got more than 100 hostages released. Most of them were Israeli, and 2 of them also had American citizenship. By contrast, I've only seen reports of Israeli military raids freeing, I think, 3 hostages. And sadly, we know that the Israeli military accidentally killed 3 hostages, as the IDF itself reported. Israel also concluded by early February that 31 hostages were already dead. And having seen how much of Gaza has been leveled by Israeli bombing, I have to worry that some of those hostages were killed by Israel itself. The New York Times, in fact, quoted released hostage Sahar Kalran as saying, "Many times I told myself that in the end, I will die from Israel's missiles and not from Hamas." Moreover, during the recent Israeli commando raid on Rafah to free 2 hostages, reports are that over 60 Palestinians were killed, many of them children. So as you weigh this vote, please note the power of negotiated hostage release as a conjunction with ceasefires, including to release as many as 6 American citizens who are believed to still be held.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. My name is Brooke Kadinananda. I go by she, her, and I am in District 5. I'm here tonight as a Jewish resident of Amherst, a social worker, and a mother, to ask for you to vote in favor of this resolution in support of the ceasefire in Gaza. During a time when our country could possibly stop the indiscriminate killing that we are all witnessing with our own eyes, we must stand on the side of justice, even in the face of racism. We may not know everything there is to know about the history and the politics. We may not be able to fix the situation, but the least that we can do is to show that we do not support the continuing bombardment that has killed over 30,000 people, over which 25,000 women and children, one of the highest escalations in history in 5 months. I'm here because I want to be one of the Jewish people who show our Palestinian neighbors and friends that there are Jews who will speak for them and stand beside them. That also means not speaking over them in regards to their liberation. This resolution has the voices of people who have been affected on all sides and have the same goal. We as Jews who support Palestine show up not to save Palestinians, but to stand in solidarity because our liberation is tied to the liberation of all oppressed peoples. If the folks who say that they care about the hostages were really honest with themselves, they would admit that if the bombing and starvation continues in Gaza when the military is largely unable to know where the location of their hostages are, then it is consequently putting them at risk as well. In order for both the Palestinian people and the Israeli hostages to have a chance at surviving, we must have a ceasefire and allow aid immediately. Please vote with your conscience and show that Amherst values life above all else, regardless of politics. Thank you for your time.
The resolution in front of you calling for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza is co-sponsored by over 1,000 Amherst residents. Among them are Palestinians, Israelis, American Muslims, American Jews, and people embracing a wide variety of other identities. The intersectionality of the sponsors and their commitment to bridge different understandings, experiences, and histories in the service of peace offers us an analogy for the kind of compassionate cooperation that is needed in Israel and Palestine. The framers of this very moderate resolution have taken great pains to strip away recriminations and recounting the long history of past harms and grievances, to bring forward a focused call to end the burgeoning tragedy in Gaza. The language has been chosen with care to highlight the urgency of the situation and to underscore that repairing all of the past violence that plagues the region can only commence after the killing stops. The resolution calls for 4 things: stop the killing, end the siege of Gaza, release all hostages, and release all humanitarian aid to end the growing famine. The British Medical Journal reports that we can expect an additional 86,000 Gazan deaths over the next 6 months as a consequence of starvation and lack of access to clean water, sanitation, and medical supplies and services. That prediction is reduced to less than 12,000 excess deaths with an immediate ceasefire. There are 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinians living in this troubled land, and the aspirations of one side to eliminate the other are delusional. It will either be endless killing and suffering and insecurity or coexistence. The path to peace begins with a ceasefire. I call on our town council to speak up in support of peace and humanity and endorse the resolution for the ceasefire that is in front of you. Thank you.
I'm a Palestinian American resident and I have 2 kids, Sammy, who's 7, and Omar, who's 4. In October, just after the town council unanimously passed its resolution condemning Hamas, the Gaza Health Ministry released the names and ages of the 6,000 confirmed dead Palestinians, 3,000 children. I found 90 called Sammy and 115 called Omar. That's more Palestinian children killed in under a month than the total number of Israelis killed in 10 years of conflict. That number has since increased 5-fold. I'd like to remind the council that there are people in this room for whom those statistics are not numbers. They are friends and family and colleagues. They share our names and our faiths, and we see our children's faces in their faces, and they are being starved and killed with our tax dollars. For some of us, our awareness of Palestinian suffering did not begin in October, but has characterized a generational trauma that runs through our families. Our people are called human animals by leaders as they are intentionally deprived of the most basic human needs, and this dehumanization is dismissed by members of our council as not a local issue. We have watched as mothers write their children's names on their limbs so they can be identified. We have watched as men, women, and children are rounded up, blindfolded, and held in military detention without charge under conditions that constitute torture. And our leaders veto permanent ceasefire resolutions in the Security Council in order to safeguard temporary ones. This resolution falls far short of acknowledging the injustice my people have faced. It simply offers a basic truth that human rights are for everyone equally, and that these rights can never be conditional. Failing to back this resolution, as written, would make an official town statement that Palestinians are less deserving of these rights. Our community has come together around this resolution in massive numbers. I have seen awareness grow, and I can tell you that people are connecting the dots of collective liberation, and we are paying attention.
Thank you for your comment.
The next up.
I'm Gary Michael Tardikov, a Ukrainian Jew with close relatives living in Jerusalem. In his novel Fema, the Israeli author Amos Oz has his title character ask, "Can a worthless man like me have sunk so low as to make a distinction between the intolerable killing of children and the not so intolerable killing of children?" The question, of course, is uttered in a novel, but since it is our nation that is supplying the weapons doing most of the killing in Gaza today, must we not ask that question of ourselves? Have we sunk so low as to make a distinction between the intolerable killing of Israelis and the not so intolerable killing of Palestinians. Prime Minister Netanyahu speaks of an Israeli war on Hamas, but since the Israeli army cannot or will not tell the difference between Hamas and men identifying themselves as Jews, speaking in Hebrew and carrying a white flag, there's no more safety from the Israeli forces on the ground than there is from the aerial bombardment of the civilian population. A bombardment, they say, is aimed at men in tunnels beneath hospitals, a target invulnerable to aerial bombardment. Now, the latest reports I can find, there have been 3 times as many civilian deaths and casualties in the Israeli attack on the people of Gaza than in the Russian attack on the Ukraine. More Palestinian children murdered than all the deaths of Ukrainian civilians. The American government, supplying Israel with over $3 billion a year in military hardware, is now clearly the major obstacle to the government of Israel negotiating with Palestinians for their political independence and protection from Israel.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Randy Stein. I lived in Amherst for 15 years. First of all, let me say I'm very glad the members of the council are interested and willing to respond to events around the world, not just in the Middle East. And I also want to say I am in favor of the ceasefire, but not for the reasons that are in this resolution. I want to point out the one place that I have serious issues with, and that is the difference between the description of what happened on October 7th and what has happened since. The description in October 7th, at least the last version I've seen, simply says that lives were taken. And the description of what has happened since the bombing of Gaza mentions women and children. I want to remind everyone that women were butchered, raped, mutilated, also on October 7th, and frankly, unfortunately, many, many years before that. I lived in Israel for 5 years on a kibbutz that now doesn't exist anymore on the northern part of Israel, kibbutz Benara. And while I was there in '78, we were bombed, and I was in a bomb shelter for 3 weeks, and several people in the kibbutz were killed. I am for peace, and I am for a resolution, and the ceasefire could be the beginning. But I think ultimately, if Palestinians and Israelis can find their way to create a state for each of these peoples in peace, that would be the resolution. What I could support is a resolution from this council with a commitment for the safety of all the people of Amherst. And therefore, I very much appreciated the very last paragraph in the resolution, and I'd love to have that highlighted. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Hoffner. I live in Amherst. The ceasefire resolution before the council is tyranny of the majority and highly divisive. The opponents are mostly Jewish, but Jews being a tiny percentage of the Amherst population, the proponents have the larger total numbers. There are Jewish supporters of the resolution, but that is no indication of unity. As a Jewish dad who is strongly in favor of a comprehensive ceasefire and who has studied Israel and the Middle East for decades, I offered to help fact check and slightly modify the resolution to make it a statement of unity. My offer was rejected, and I was attacked and insulted because I am outspoken about Jew hatred in the town of Amherst, which makes me the wrong kind of Jew to be included in the group behind this resolution. Gallup polls indicate that many blacks oppose affirmative action and many women oppose abortion rights. Clarence Thomas helped end affirmative action, and Amy Coney Barrett helped end abortion rights. No one would ever cite that evidence as indicating unity for these outcomes. When a marginalized group is a tiny percentage of the population, it is easy for a bigoted majority to trample over the small number of dissenters to a resolution, and they can always find some collaborators from within the marginalized group because it feels safer to stand with a threatening mob than to oppose it. The best outcome would be unity of all council members abstaining on this resolution. I also note I have indicated to Ms. Griesmer a concern about violation of the open meeting law because there's been an amended version of the resolution circulated right before the meeting, not posted 48 hours beforehand for the open meeting law, and I believe that is a violation of state, local.
Thank you.
Good evening, Town Council members. Good evening, fellow citizens of Amherst, and good evening to those who have come to offer their support. I'll be brief. Israel is at war due to an unprovoked attack, a ceasefire broken by Hamas, and has the right to defend itself as a sovereign nation. A resolution calling for a ceasefire this evening will not bring about peace. In fact, of all the signs I've seen out tonight, not a single one of them called for peace. They called for a ceasefire. In the Hamas charter, it says,
Please, stop.
there shall be no legitimacy of the Zionist entity. Hamas believes that no part of the land of Palestine should be compromised or conceded, irrespective of the causes, the circumstances, the pressures. Hamas rejects any alternative to the full and complete liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. Those of you who know geography can figure that one out. So, there are many, many citizens being killed. I know we all want peace. I hope. But Hamas senior leader Khalid Mashal stated October 19th that no nation is liberated without sacrifices. In all wars, there are some civilian victims. We are not responsible for them. What? You got it.
Please.
He also vowed to repeat October 7th attacks time and again until Israel is annihilated. Ismail Haniyeh, arguably the leader of Hamas, says we will not recognize Israel. Palestine must stretch from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Hamas official Hamad al-Regeb said he prayed for the annihilation and paralysis of the Jews, who he describes as filthy animals, transformed them into filthy, ugly animals, apes, and pigs, because of the injustice and evil they had brought about.
Thank you.
I come to my council for parking tickets, not for foreign policy.
Thank you. I'm a Holocaust survivor. I'm 84 years old, so I'm considered a child survivor. And 1.5 million children were killed during the Holocaust. So I owe my life to my non-Jewish neighbors who took a risk and saved the Jewish child. Since October 7th, I feel again a Holocaust. And now living in Amherst, where I felt so wonderful for the last 25 years, being involved in so many community activities, I feel all of a sudden, again, like the unwanted Jew. I have wonderful friends from Egypt, from Turkey, and all of a sudden, we are not the friends anymore because of this kind of statement. This is divisive. Let's leave the foreign policy to our president and our vice president. And I think they're doing a very good job, and hopefully they will get there. But it is not our place in Little Amherst to decide foreign policy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm John Lowe, I live in Amherst, and I think there's no one in this room, and I feel really comfortable saying this, who isn't for peace and a ceasefire. And what we have to differentiate is how does that ceasefire come about, and who is the aggressor, and who and what is the ultimate goal in mind. I think it was made very clear from something that Lisa Pearlbinder said, that Hamas has very little interest in a ceasefire per se. And when you talk about all of the people, Jews, Muslims, anyone else who were killed, it is horrendous. All that being said, I'm confused. Where was the town council when 600,000 people were killed in Syria? 26,000 children and 16,000 women. Where was this town council as the slaughter in Yemen is taking place? Where are all of our protesters? I don't see them having protests about that. No. It seems like Mr. Trump has been very successful, and I imagine in this room there aren't very many Trump supporters. Maybe a few. I happen not to be a Trump supporter. But he has been successful. He has opened up the woodwork, and the racists and the anti-Semites have come crawling out, and they come crawling out very, very hard. I think we need to be very careful about what we do as a town in terms of, are we going to support a resolution that is incomplete in its ultimate meaning? Do we understand history? I think not. Thank you.
We don't do well always with dialogue in Amherst. We're pretty good at talking and not always good listening, but we're going to get a lot better. Town council, I applaud you. You get to listen all night long. Thank you. You do a great job. Whatever we're paying you, it isn't enough. The job of the town council is to make life in Amherst peaceful, to make it great and beautiful and worthwhile. I think spending your time and your political capital and your civic reputations on a symbolic exogenous statement is not the council's responsibility. You passed the humanitarian resolution in October. You're under pressure now, I know. The concept of a ceasefire seems irresistible. Who isn't for peace? We all are. We all are. People laughed before the distinction between peace and ceasefire. The word peace doesn't appear on the posters. It doesn't appear in the resolution. Tonight's proposed resolution only inflames the situation. Please leave it there. Let it be. Or be prepared to amend it month after month from now on. As a member of the Jewish community of Amherst, and I'm specifically not a spokesperson, I'm just simply a member, I'm telling you unequivocally on the record, our synagogue has not voted to support this resolution. This resolution accomplishes none of what it seems to say it's set out to do. It's a distraction. We can't afford for you to be distracted. It is not for this body to decide. Please abstain.
Occurring to me that in a town known for speaking out early and often on international issues, to counsel resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza would be at all controversial. Similarly bewildering that anyone would suggest that it is inappropriate for our elected councillors to weigh in on an international issue, that one is not qualified to speak on the subject unless they have an advanced degree in history or political science. But a concern that goes beyond just the potholes in our roads is part of the DNA of this town. Our family has lived in Amherst since 1990 when our son was about to start kindergarten. We stayed because Amherst was diverse, tolerant, and international. We wanted our son to grow up in this atmosphere. As an immigrant and a foreigner, I felt at home too. When Operation Desert Storm was launched in 1991 and military cargo planes roared overhead, our son became anxious. His artwork featured threatening bombers looking like something out of Star Wars. We tried to reassure him, but the bombers kept coming. Then a young man, Gregory Levy, committed an act of self-immolation in protest, right on the Amherst Town Common. There was an outpouring of grief. We took our son to a small peace vigil at the gates of Westover Air Force Base, where we held hands and sang, "Give peace a chance." This was a turning point for him. His parents were doing something about this scary situation, and he too was part of the solution. He did a new drawing, this time of grounded bombers and soldiers coming home. This story defines our town for me. Children feel safer when they know that the grown-ups are working to make things better. Active citizens make healthy communities. Speaking out for peace is a good in itself.
Today, dying babies and their helpless parents have become daily spectacles on our screens. Although we are an overeducated population here in Amherst, it doesn't require an advanced degree to call out stop.
Thank you. Jim, that blocks people's views, just put it down. Okay.
I'm Jim Oldham. I'm a resident of Amherst. I'm here in support of the resolution, and I'm here to add my name to saying that Palestinian lives matter. On October 16th, this body passed a resolution unanimously that made clear on behalf of all of us in Amherst that Israeli lives matter. For 5 months since then, we've watched as people have been bombed, children and their parents have been killed and buried on the rubble, that the weapons paid for by our government, our taxes, has been used to murder 30,000 people, to displace practically the entire 2 million population of Gaza. And as things stand now, the imbalance of our American policy that speaks out about human rights when it suits us and ignores human rights when it doesn't is shown at the local level, where we have a resolution that's been passed on behalf of all of us, speaking out about Israeli lives, but we haven't said that Palestinian lives matter. This resolution would balance that. There have been suggestions that it's inappropriate, whereas the other resolution was done without public involvement or without the need for public demand. You did it on your own. I'll say the other thing I'm here to say is silence is complicity. A no vote, an abstention, an amendment to change the meaning of this, any of that is complicity in those deaths that are continuing today and will continue tomorrow. We need to tell our government to stop, and we need to, at the local level, raise our voices as a community. You did it for Israel, please do it for the Palestinians.
Thank you.
Julia Ramirez, Ehan. I'm a Colombian resident of Amherst. I grew up in this country as an undocumented immigrant, and I understand what it feels like to be overlooked and to be vilified by those in power. 30,000 Palestinians have been killed. Gaza is close to starvation, and our tax dollars are being used to aid in genocide. Many members of this community are angry, we're pissed, and we're scared. That makes this a local issue. This mild resolution is a baseline. We should be doing everything we can to resist this kind of dehumanization that asks us to overlook basic human rights for anyone. You passed a resolution supporting the people of Ukraine. Passed a resolution to support the people of Palestine. None of us want to stand here and audition for your support. The fact that this is even up for discussion exposes a racism that undermines what this town claims to stand for. You declare the importance of inclusivity and equity in your campaign statements. Pass this resolution and show people like us that our lives matter and our safety is important to this town. Pass this resolution as it has been endorsed by hundreds of members of this community, and live up to your own Human Rights Day proclamation, which says that each one of us, everywhere and at all times, is entitled to the full range of human rights, and that it is every person's responsibility to uphold them. They bind us together as a global community. Thank you for your time.
That's enough, thank you.
My name is Jill Brevick, District 2, she, her. I'm urging you to vote yes on the resolution in support of a ceasefire and not abstain the vote. I've seen the organizing group for this resolution conduct a thoughtful process, drafting a resolution including diverse perspectives, securing more than 700 individual resident signatures, supporting affinity groups to relate their expertise using data. We've helped individuals safely share their experiences while dealing with the deep harm they've endured during this process. All the while facing arguments that this is not a local issue worthy of the council's time. Beyond the privilege inherent in that statement, beyond the insensitivity to those mourning loved ones killed in Gaza, the insensitivity to all the affected individuals that you've heard over and over, I'll focus on the fact that we chose you, based on your promises verbatim, to shape your agenda around the issues important to residents, encourage active engagement, and promote inclusion, safety, and justice. We looked at your voting records on other global resolutions, and who would imagine when we voted that any of you would claim that this isn't what you were elected to do? Abstaining all of a sudden against the status quo sends one loud message. The victims of this crisis are less important to you, less human, less worthy of unconditional basic human rights. An overwhelming number of residents will see this for the discrimination that it is, and we will vote accordingly. Now, we ask you to listen to the voices that we have raised. This resolution supporters are Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, the broader BIPOC community, Jewish, LGBTQ, immigrants, survivors of interpersonal violence, myself included, and descendants of survivors of other genocides and global atrocities. Many of us with related experiences of marginalization, hate, and violence did not have to come around on this. If you're working on coming around, please remember that these are the residents who are elected to protect and respect, and I urge you to be self-reflective, amplify our message, and do not abstain. Thank you.
Quiet.
It is a fundamental principle of our society that the voice of the people should be heard. That's why when this entire crisis started, I wrote a lengthy, angry letter to President Biden regarding my opposition to the continued bombing and oppression of the Palestinian people. The death of over 30,000 people, 11,000 children, countless people missing, folks crammed into a bombing area like fish in a barrel, unable to move, denied political agency. What I got back from Biden was an auto-generated form letter. We need to increase our voice. We need to speak as one regarding this great humanitarian mission. Just as the Council has spoken out against the Iraq War, against the apartheid in South Africa, against the war in Ukraine, against the terrorist actions of Hamas. You're no stranger to speaking out against injustice. Your voice, combined with the voices of cities and towns across the country, will force our leaders to take notice of this issue and to take clear, definitive, decisive action to end the oppression and genocide of Palestinians. That starts with the ceasefire. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Fatima Anwar, and I'm a professor in Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at UMass Amherst. I teach students at the undergraduate and graduate level, and I also advise research of many PhD students. I also serve on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee of my department. The student population at UMass is diverse. Many of my students have come from all over the US and the world, and they call Amherst their home. The university prides itself in its diverse student body and faculty, and claims to strive for equity and inclusion for all. Today, I am here because I have seen the impact of the horrific war in Gaza on the health and performance of many of my students firsthand. Most of my students of color, especially Black, Brown, Arab, Muslims, and Jews, are not able to perform well in their classes, exams, and research. They're heartbroken at how their pain is not acknowledged at the university level and also in the town of Amherst where they live, where the ceasefire resolution is still pending despite witnessing the daily horrors in Gaza for the past 5 months. Many of my students are also afraid of speaking up about Gaza because of the fear of repercussions from university authorities and Islamophobic actions from their peers. We all are aware when 57 UMass students protested with the sit-in at the Whitmer administration building in October to protest the horrors in Gaza, it led to retaliation from the UMass administration at the town of Amherst, creating a significant impact to their studies and their career. I, as a person of color and someone who is visibly Muslim, have moved to Western Mass and chosen to work at UMass because of the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The town of Amherst prides itself in. I hope the council today will take the first step to uphold their values of inclusion and support the ceasefire resolution, and set a precedent for other institutions in Amherst like UMass to follow. Thank you.
From my perspective, this resolution has brought out three categories of people. The first category are people who are thinking with their heart. They see the images and they feel love and compassion for those who they identify with. Justifiably, they become angry and they feel hatred towards people who they believe to be the ones hurting the people that they love. The second category of people are thinking with their heads. They're thinking this is a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. This isn't as simple as just passing a resolution. There's lots of things to consider. The third category of people are people who are here in spirit. And they know that there's something else going on and they can feel it. What that is, they're not quite sure. They can feel it in their bones, and I'm one of them, that this is something that is beyond just Israel-Palestine, beyond just this present conflict. So even though I am supportive of the ceasefire, I do not believe that it will address the needs. What needs to happen is all three people need to sit down and talk, figure out a way to find some other peaceful resolution to this. Thank you.
I'd like to shed a different light on all these things. My family's all refugees, and several of them died in concentration camps. I went to Srebrenica, stood in the place where a relative of mine died. But what we have to do is achieve peace, and something that people don't quite realize is that enemies are always in contact with each other. They're always negotiating with each other, and we need to build on. Let me tell you the story of my great uncle, Kurt Bondi, who was a professor in Germany in Göttingen, was fired in 1933 with all the rest of the professors there. And there's plaque to him and other people in Göttingen now. He was then asked by the Nazis and the Zionists, who were working together. Nazis and Zionists were working together to help Jewish kids get out of the country of Germany at that time. He started a school called Gross Basin. The people who were at it are still in contact with each other, and they were they wanted to come to the United States. Then all of a sudden, I guess the Nazis changed their tune and they took him and 25 of his students to Buchenwald. And you can imagine what the end of the story was, only it was different than that. Most people in Buchenwald would just die there, right? However, a Virginia businessman named Talaman went to the State Department and asked them to help. The State Department then negotiated with the Nazis and got all of them out of Buchenwald, including my great uncle, and they came to the United States and had prosperous lives here. Interesting case, in my opinion, of cooperation between people who were real enemies. Now,
thank you for your comment. I'm sorry I let it go. Okay. Thank you.
These are really difficult issues, and I appreciate the struggles that I'm sure you all are thinking about this. A lot of people, I'm sure, in Palestine felt that what Hamas did on October 7th was justified because of the many years many have lost their homes, many of them have been in occupation for many, many years, and people in Gaza, many of them have starved under the embargo and or been bombed in disproportionate things after rocket attacks. But I'm glad that you guys did not buy into that justification. You condemned what Hamas did. If you recognize that it did not justify killing civilians in Israel because of the horrible things that happened to Palestinians, you have to recognize also that it doesn't justify killing thousands and thousands and thousands of civilians to justify because of what Hamas did and what Hamas might do in the future. I kind of like to crunch numbers. 30,000 doesn't sound very many people, but I compared that to the American population. If you compare that to the number of people in Gaza in the US, this is equivalent to 5 million people dying. Can you imagine what it would be like if we lost 5 million Americans? How many of us would have family members that died? You're just as dead if you die on the bayonet or a bullet of a Hamas terrorist
or raped to death, as you are if a bomb is dropped on your apartment building.
Thank you for your comments, Peter.
Or that bit fast.
I'd like to go in a different direction this evening and ask you to engage with me in a little thought experiment. Imagine you grew up and there was someone in your family who you were close to, an uncle or an older cousin, whom the entire family deeply admired. They admired him for the difficult challenges he faced in his life, his courage and perseverance. But as you grow up, your admiration for this person becomes more complicated. You begin to see flaws and mistakes. You nevertheless love him very much. When this person faced difficult challenges, he lost some of his brilliance and he became more rigid. You slowly become aware that there's more than one story here. Others have been affected too. And then one day, something really terrible happened. Thousands were murdered. The relative was deeply hurt, and you were too. What happened was almost unthinkable. This uncle reacted with all his power and strength and started hurting people who had hurt him. He was living out the saying, hurt people hurt people. This response was beyond the expected. It included killing children, bombing hospitals, decimating families, destroying homes. You can't help but feel the utter distress of all this tragedy because remember, it's too personal. It's so personal. And what makes it even worse, your family is torn apart by this. As Rabbi Kate Mizrahi recently wrote, I quote, "I love Israel, but not more than Judaism itself, not more than humanity. Must I wade into these troubled waters, say stop to this madness, wage peace somehow, even if its efforts aren't so perfect? Is it okay to remain silent? What would you do? What should you do?"